I was like looking back through my notes because it's been a little while since I opened it last. And I wrote in here, I was like, things you're like, girl, tell me about it. Or like, this is so right. Or like,
I love that.
oh my gosh. Hey everybody, and welcome to the Quarter Life Crisis Project and this episode of RyCurious, where we broaden our horizons by talking to people from all walks of life who have great perspectives to share. I am so excited that you're here, and I'm especially excited that the lady sitting next to me is here, Miss Allison McWilliams. Allison, thank you for being here.
I'm thrilled to be here.
Allison was a great resource and friend of mine during my time here at Wake Forest and continues to be a wonderful friend and confidant as a young alumni. We're going to talk to Allison today about professional development. It is right up her alley, specifically as it relates to mentorship. What does it mean to have a mentor? Why is mentoring important? How do you get a mentor? We're going to explore all of these things. And we're also going to talk about Allison's book, 5 for Your First 5, which explores 5 key best practice areas for students who are making the career change out of college, but really for anyone who's at a transition point or junction point in their life. Maybe you find yourself in a new city or in a new job or a new industry. It's a great resource for you to have. So Allison, to kick things off, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do here at the Mentoring Resource Center at Wake Forest?
Sure.
And how you got here.
Yeah, so hi everybody. My official title is Assistant Vice President for Mentoring and Alumni Personal and Career Development here at Wake Forest University. So I am a Wake Forest grad. Graduated in 95 and went down to the University of Georgia and did my master's, ultimately did my PhD down there, and really fell into a great role there, running leadership development programs, organizational development programs, and ultimately mentorship programs. And came back to Wake Forest in 2010 to create what we call our Mentoring Resource Center. So it was a brand new center as part of our Office of Personal and Career Development, which is basically a traditional career services office, but has been blown up and made much more holistic and intentional and really focused on figuring out who you are, what your strengths are, what your values are, what's important to you, and how all of those things inform many things about your life, but one of them being the career decision process down the road. So I was brought in to create this Mentoring Resource Center, which sits very much on the personal side of that work, and to really develop a culture of mentoring across our community. So with undergraduate students, with faculty, with staff, helping them to understand what effective mentoring looks like, how to engage in these relationships, why it matters. One of the things that I often talk about is, particularly with our students, that this is skill development for life. And these are things you're going to need to know how to do for the rest of your life. And then I also picked up this little role on the side, the Alumni Personal and Career Development Center, which I also run, and that is focused on supporting our alumni post-graduation with a pretty concentrated focus on our youngest alumni, so first 5-10 years out. So it's that transition out of Wake Forest into your first professional roles as you're figuring out all of that stuff. And it's a lot of the same work. So it's how are your values, who you are, your strengths, your interests, the experiences that you're having, informing the choices and decisions that you're making as a professional and as an adult.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, definitely I've partaken in that type of programming. It's been hugely beneficial. It's been able to connect you to people within your community and outside of it. It's been really fantastic. So we're going to be talking a lot about mentoring. We're going to be using that word a lot. So I think it's important to kind of key up the conversation by just defining what mentoring is. I think it's one of those words where we think we know what it is. And then someone says, what does it mean? And you're like, helping.
Yeah.
You know?
That's
so
right.
How would you define mentorship?
That's right. And one of the reasons I love mentorship is that, or mentoring, whatever word you want to use, is that it is experience-based. And so what that means is that we all bring personal experiences to it. We have all had some experience with mentoring, some positive, some not so positive, but it informs how we think about doing this work. So for me, and the way we define it out of this office, is mentoring is a personal and purposeful relationship in which a more experienced person provides guidance, feedback, and wisdom to facilitate the growth and development of a less experienced person. So it is a relationship. There is intentionality behind it. So it's not just, being buddies with someone, or, catching up at the water cooler or the coffee pot, and walking away and feeling like, I did some really great mentoring right there. There is great intention behind it. There are, generally speaking, two people involved, a more experienced person and a less experienced person. And we use those terms really intentionally. The way we used to think about mentoring is that it was an older person and a younger person. Right. And the older person had all of the wisdom and all of the knowledge and all of the experience, and the younger person basically had nothing, right? And we don't think about it in those ways anymore. So both parties bring knowledge and experience and wisdom into the relationship. And also, you can be mentored by someone who's younger than you. You can be mentored by someone who is your same age. So it really is about the experience piece. And that means the person on the mentee side has to be really intentional about setting some goals and thinking about what is it that I'm looking to be mentored around. Because one of the things that distinguishes mentoring from other types of supporting relationships, so we might think of coaching or counseling or advising, is that the mentor is expected to have experience in whatever that area is. So it's that idea of finding someone who has walked down that path before you and knows the way. And then the other piece of it is that a mentor is a facilitator. So the mentor is not there to do the work for you. And this is something that I think a lot of people don't think about with mentoring relationships, that most of the work is done by the mentee. And you have to, one of the things that we talk a lot about, and I certainly talk a lot about in my book, is that the person in that mentee role has to take ownership for their own growth and development. And if you get someone, whether it's a mentor or someone else, to walk beside you on that path, that is just gravy. Yeah. But you've got to be willing to do the work first and foremost. And so the mentor is really a facilitator who asks great questions and provides great feedback and opens doors and challenges you and does all of those great things that we think about that wonderful mentors do.
So I think it's a really great distinction to make. And so what is it about mentorship that makes you so passionate about it? Or what about mentorship do you think makes it more effective than coaching or advising?
Sure. And it may not be more effective, right? So I think that's really important, is you've got to figure out what you need. And you don't always need a mentor, right? So I'm the mentoring girl, and I'm a big fan of it. And I also recognize that sometimes what we need is an accountability partner. Sometimes what we need is a coach. So you don't always need a mentor. And at the same time, I would say, I'm someone who has been super well mentored in my life. So I certainly have directly benefited from it. I have seen how it benefits other people. I've certainly had the great pleasure of serving as a mentor to people and been able to witness that and the transformation that happens with people. It is fundamentally, it's how we learn. And that even goes to when you think about children and how they learn, right? It's by someone showing them the way, someone, encouraging them to try something, someone helping them think about, well, you just did that. What happened? What did you learn from it? How can you use that in the future? That's the entire mentoring experience right there. And it's a gift.
Yeah. So absolutely. So you mentioned you've seen the benefits of it, right? Can you give us like an example of a relationship maybe you were a part of, or something that you witnessed that really was like, that's mentorship in action, that's how it's supposed to work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think, very loosely speaking, I can say that I would not be here in this role if it wasn't for the person that I worked for back in my previous job at Georgia, who just so happened to be a Wake Forest grad. I didn't know that when she took me under her wing. But there's no question in my mind that her advocacy for me and her pushing me to think maybe a little bigger than I was thinking about myself. I know, like, from a very direct place, the conversation that she had with my now supervisor, Andy, literally got me the job. But you know, the ways that she encouraged me and the questions that she asked me and the way that she developed and grew me along the way, I mean, I'm a completely different person for it. Yeah.
That's awesome. That goes back to what you were talking about before about mentors being a facilitator.
Right.
About like asking you questions and maybe challenging you in certain ways, right? And not just, completely paving the way for you, but empowering you to walk down that path.
Yeah, because ultimately, I had to do it. I had to walk down the path. She wasn't going to do the work for me, right? And in fact, she was headed off somewhere else to do something else. Literally, like, was heading off to Alabama to do something else. But yeah, like opening up those doors and opening up your mind to different things.
Yeah. That's awesome. It's such a powerful thing, and I'm sure people who are watching are saying, that's awesome, like, I want a mentor.
Right? Who doesn't?
I want a mentor. Or, people are thinking, that sounds like a really rewarding thing to do. I would love to be a mentor. So I'm going to kind of ask you like a two-pronged question. Okay. So the first is, for people out there who feel like they would benefit from having a mentor relationship, what are some ways that they can identify potential mentors and ask someone to be a mentor? How do you get a mentor?
Yep.
And then for people out there who are thinking, I think I'd be a good mentor, what are some ways to kind of develop skills to make you be an effective mentor?
Yeah. And they're kind of like two sides of the same coin in a lot of ways. So starting with the people who, are sitting around saying, I'd really like to find mentorship. So this kind of goes back to what I was saying before, which is that you have to do the work. So there are two parts to any effective mentoring relationship. There's the goal and there's the relationship. So first and foremost, you have to figure out, like, what is it that you are working on? What is it that you are seeking mentorship around? Now, that doesn't have to be like, I'm trying to become the vice president of the Northwest Territory, right? Like, it can be, I'm trying to, I'm struggling through some big life questions, and I need somebody to help me navigate some of that personal stuff, right? Like, it can be something along those lines. But you have to first start there and figure that out, and then you kind of do a survey to figure out, okay, who is already in my network? Who do I already know who could potentially serve in this role for me?
I'd be right underneath you.
Right, exactly. And I often say, there's a step that kind of is not recognized, which is just like, pay attention. Like, there's probably someone who's trying to speak into your life right now, and you're just not listening. And so that's always a really good step. But then there's the piece that's the relationship building piece. So it's not just, oh, that person would be good for me. I'm going to walk up to them and say, hi, stranger, would you be my mentor, right? Like, none of us would want someone to do that to us. So it's a matter of building the relationship. And it starts with, I know you're a big fan of the idea of the curiosity conversation. It's doing that kind of work. So can I take you to coffee and talk to you for 30 minutes about your life, about the work that you're doing, about some choices that you've made, whatever it may be, to start to build the relationship. And it's not that different than building a relationship with anybody else, right? So think about how you built a relationship with friends that you have, or maybe your partner, or whoever it may be, right? Like, you didn't walk up and beat them over the head with it, right? Like, you said, hey, do you want to go get some coffee? Can I have a conversation with you? Can I think about some questions to ask? And let it develop over time in those ways. And then when you get to a point where you feel like, okay, this is comfortable, then it's, can I share with you some things that I've been working on? And would you be willing to spend some time with me talking about these things? So keep it very natural and normal in those ways. You also have the option of seeking out formal mentoring programs, right? Which, if you're part of an organization or you're part of a civic group, you volunteer in some ways, there may be a formal mentoring program that you can plug into, and basically have a mentor kind of given to you in those ways. And so I think that there's always value in seeking those things out as well. They provide some kind of different benefits in the way they expand your network in interesting ways. On the other side, so it's interesting. I'm always a little wary of people who are, thinking like, I just really want to mentor someone. Let me go find someone to mentor. Because I think you're coming at it from the wrong place, because that becomes very much about you, as opposed to being about the other person. And it's always supposed to be about the mentee. I teach a class on leading from a place of mentorship. And one of the things that I always say in that is, you don't have to be a formal mentor to everybody. That doesn't preclude you from using the tools and strategies that mentors use in your everyday conversations with people. So, before you tell someone what to do, ask another question. Think about how you're giving feedback. Think about how you're sharing stories from your personal experience. Think about how you're being a connector and opening up doors for people. These are all great things that mentors do, and it doesn't require that level of formality that a mentoring relationship requires.
So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about Allison's book, 5 for Your First 5, Own Your Career in Life After College. So this was a great resource for me. I went through it and did the exercises after I graduated and was new in my career. And as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I think it's a great resource really for anyone who's whose life has been disrupted and they're making a change of some kind and want to ingrain themselves in a new community. So can you talk a little bit about, just at a high level, what the impetus for this book was? Why do you feel like it was important to write this?
Yeah. So it's interesting that you say that. It's a great book for anyone. So it directly came out of the work that we're doing with our young alumni, and really our youngest alumni. So one of the things that we do is we run these young alumni mentoring groups, literally all around the country. And this directly came out of those conversations. And so when you read the book and you see, the examples and the vignettes, that actually comes directly from those young professionals, and the things that they were struggling with. And I would say that I say all the time that, these are the things that I'm thinking about, and I'm like 25 years into my career, right? So I think the basic content, the basic principles sort of hold true no matter where you are. I've had people tell me who are moving into retirement, like, with just a little bit of tweaking, you could turn this into a book for people moving into that phase.
5 for your first 55.
That's right. 5 for your last 5.
Yes.
Right. We're not going to call it that. So it really came from this, both speaking out of the experience with our young alumni, but also, so I had over time built this curriculum, kind of loosely speaking, that I was using with these groups, and I was carrying around these articles and saying, watch this TED Talk and read this other thing, and I was kind of sick of that, and finally said, oh my gosh, I can write a book. And so it was really written to be a resource that we could use with those programs. So now it actually, when we do these groups, we give them the book and we work through it. For those who don't have the opportunity to be in those groups or other programs that we do, that hopefully they can sit down and have the experience of sitting across from me. Like, these are the questions I would be asking you. These are the things that I would be saying to you as you're going through the experience.
That's awesome. So can you give us a little bit of a taste of, so again, this is 5 for Your First 5, Owning Your Career in Life After College. I'm going to put a link to the Amazon page in the description below, but if you can give us a little bit of a teaser of what are these 5 topical areas and how are they applicable to people making transitions?
So the reason for the title, so 5 for Your First 5, it's the 5 key things that we think all young professionals should be mastering in their first 5 years after college. So number one, do the work, and that's where it all starts. And so that is all about figuring out who you are, so the values identification piece, what matters to you, but also how to show up and be a rock star young professional. So what it means to show up, do the work, be present. How do you know when the time is to speak up, when the time is to shut up? All those important things that we struggle with in those first few years after college.
Yeah, that was a great section of the book, and I think, this such an important piece of sort of defining your values, because I think that sets the course for everything else.
Yeah, and we come back to it throughout the book. It's all the way through, because that's how important we think it is. So 2 and 3 are kind of all of the life stuff. So 2 is build a life, 3 is create community. So build a life is kind of what I always say is sort of the nuts and bolts of the life stuff. So how do you figure out how to manage your time when it's completely your own? How do you set priorities? How do you think about health and wellness, financial planning, all of those good things?
Stuff that no one teaches you.
That's right. That's right. And it by no means is it's not a financial management course, but just the idea that it's important to think about how are you spending your money and how are you being intentional about those things. Create community is one of the phrases that I use a lot, is that you have to live where you live. And so what does that mean? What does it mean to kind of build community, to put down some roots? Even if you're going to be in a place you think for only a year or two, you never know what's going to happen. And so how do you find friends as an adult? How do you find those mentors and sponsors that you need? And why do those things matter? And then 4 is called practice reflection. And we actually, throughout the book, are these reflective exercises, but we feel like it's so important that we put a whole chapter around it. And so another phrase that I use a lot is that it's all data. So every experience that you're having.
Talk about what it means for everything to be data.
Yeah.
It's a good concept.
So for every experience that you're having, everything that you're going through, you're just collecting data. And often we're trying to make decisions without having gathered enough data, without having gotten enough information to make those decisions. So, and a great example of this is sort of one that I use in the book, and this happens all the time, is I'll have a young professional come to me and say, my job isn't going that well. I don't really see any avenues for me to move up here. I'd love to stay here, but I can't see where, I could go anywhere here. But I have this friend who works at this other organization who says there may be a position coming open in like 6 months, and they think I would be great for it. What do you think I should do? And it's kind of like, well, first of all, that's not a choice, because this over here doesn't even exist yet, right? But you need to gather some more information on that, but also a lot more information on where you are now, right? So have you talked to your manager? Do you know if there are going to be opportunities coming down the pike? Have you even voiced any kind of interest in that? Are there skills and knowledge areas that you could be developing to make yourself more available to those sorts of things? But also with the life stuff that, we need to kind of assess where we are and what are the data points that we're missing. And you're never going to have all of the information that you need to make a choice, but you need to make the most informed choice that you can. And there's just no excuse for saying like, well, I don't know, particularly in today's day and age, you have lots of information available at your fingertips, so go do your homework. So a lot of that, thinking about how you seek out feedback and have those conversations and why they matter, the importance of emotional intelligence, all of that good stuff. And then the last one's called Own What's Next, and that's the idea that life doesn't end in year 5. And so how do we take all of this information that we've gathered about ourselves, about our values, and our professional decisions and our life decisions and the feedback that we've gathered, and use it to make a plan for what may be coming next. And typically, you're not going to read this chapter by chapter, 1 year at a time, but in that year 5, you're starting to think about things like grad school. You may be getting married, you may be having kids. You know, there's some kind of big life choices or shifts that tend to happen around them that sort of change things up.
For sure.
Yeah.
So you spoke to these 5 areas for development. Which of these would you say, in the conversations that you've had with people, is the one where people struggle the most, and why do you feel like that is?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would actually say 2 areas. First and foremost is the work piece, which is also why we start with that, right? But I think that we have to recognize that there is nothing in the educational process that prepares you for work. You know, there's a lot about education that prepares you for work, and I'm a big fan of education,
right.
obviously. But the process of, you know, your life organized around semesters, that you're given a syllabus at the beginning of each semester
right.
that has a grading rubric that tells you exactly how to be successful, and you're going to get immediate feedback at the end of that. And then you get to hit a reset button and start all over again with a nice little vacation in between. None of that is about work life. And so to go from 16 plus years of that, a lot of which has happened like in a lecture environment too, into a world where you have to figure it out on your own. You have to figure out what are the measures for success. You're going to have some projects that are going to have no end date on them. You may never get feedback on things. That can be really challenging. And then to realize that you have to do it all on your own, that's why it's so important to find those people who can be mentors and sponsors and advocates for you, because that can be a really jarring experience. So I think that's a big one to begin with. And then what was really surprising to me is how much of the life stuff seemed to come up, and so things around managing time when it's all your own to manage. I got a lot of questions around, how do I find a hobby? Which when that first came up, I was like, what are you talking about? How do you find a hobby? Like, just go do things. But then realize that there's a whole generation of people whose lives have been completely scripted for them from day one. And therefore they don't have the skill set to figure out, what do I do with my free time? And does it all have to be meaningful, right? Or can I just go kind of goof off for a bit? So, and then all of the community building pieces that go with that as well. So what about you?
I definitely would probably say that piece as well.
The
kind of how you spend your time. So I'm someone who very much likes structure, and so I, did very well in school for that reason. And so I was good at kind of putting structures in place for myself, for the most part. But because I had to in work, right? So I can impose structure where there isn't one in work, but outside of work, when they don't have much incentive to, it's hard, right?
Yeah.
And so, in terms of like thinking outside the box, right? I've always said that I can definitely think outside the box. I can decorate a box. I can drive you neat to the box. If you tell me to draw the box, like put the structure in place, paralyzed.
Yeah.
So that for me was something that was a challenge, because I didn't have a ton of time, like you said, but I had time. I didn't know how to spend it. So because I wasn't surrounded by people all the time.
Right.
I didn't have clubs I was part of anymore, and how do I make sense of that? But I think there are mentors you can find. There are people out there. There's groups that are out there. And you can challenge yourself to do different things. I joined a kickball league.
Yeah.
I joined a kickball league. I no longer play kickball.
Yeah. I know a lot of people who played kickball in their adult lives.
And now they're retired. Cause they
a lot of them, yeah.
Because they were injured.
Yeah.
It's dangerous.
Yeah.
So brief sidebar. I played first base in kickball. Got mauled by a guy who was easily 300 pounds, like a freight train. And I was wearing glasses that day. Don't know why. And they landed in the outfield. Like it was like a commercial. It was like a cartoon go flying through the air in slow motion, just thud, class in the outfield. That was the last of my kickball, but that's
the end of your kickball
for another
career.
time. Yeah, but point being, right, you could do things. I never played kickball before that,
right?
Except in like gym in middle school.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more out there than you realize. And
Yeah.
it's that living where you live and finding those things,
right?
That make it really important.
And I think too, recognizing that what you're going through is normal. Right? Like one of the things that we talk about a lot in these groups that we do is normalizing the experience, right? And there's a moment in all of them where someone will say, isn't it interesting that we're all doing different things, we're all in different places, but we're all having the same experiences, the same struggles. And there's some comfort in that, right? Like, I'm not the only one who's struggling to figure this stuff out.
Absolutely. So I want to get a little existential to wrap things up. So thinking back to your first 5, Allison,
it's a long time ago,
right out of school, what would you have done differently?
Pretty much everything. In all seriousness, looking back on it, so I graduated from Wake. I was a really good liberal arts graduate, English and Spanish double major, and did not want to get a job, and was dating somebody who was going down to the University of Georgia for law school, and I said, well, that sounds like fun, I'll go too. And so I went and got my master's in journalism, which is not as random as it seems, but it really was an avoidance tactic, and I don't regret it. I don't regret the decision. I don't regret the degree, but if I had it to do all over again, I would have made different decisions. I spent 5 or 6 years living in an apartment with a 3-month lease that I re-upped every 3 months because I was going to leave at any moment once I figured out what I was doing next, which is just ridiculousness. And eventually bought a house and was in Georgia for 15 years, right? But like, I never fully committed to the experience, and nor did I fully commit to going and having one of those other experiences that I kept tossing around in my head. So all of that I would do differently, and again, I don't regret any of it because I'm also very cognizant of the fact that every single decision that I have made up to this point has led me to this place. There are other ways I could have gotten here, but they all led me to this place. So one of the stories that I use in the book is refer to the movie. There's a movie called Sliding Doors. It's an old movie with Gwyneth Paltrow when she was going through her British phase, pre-Goop. You can go look that up. Back when she used to act in movies. But it's not a great movie, but it's an interesting movie in that it's all built on the premise of we watch her in parallel lives, and it all hinges on whether she gets on the tube in London or not, the subway. And so we get to see her life if she gets on, and we get to see her life if she misses her train. And they're pretty close lives, but they are different, and it all hinges on that one choice that happens. And the thing about life is we don't get to see that, right? So every decision that we make, every choice that we make, even the ones where we don't make them, right? Like we miss a train, but that has impacts down the road, and it's fine because there's this alternate me out there that's living in California or wherever, or living in Europe and having some fabulous life. But I don't know that, right? I don't wake up every day going, I wonder what alternate me is doing today, right? So you just live your life, and you make choices, and they open up opportunities for you, and then you make another one. And if you don't like the choice that you made, you make a different one. And I'm the best example of it all works out. So.
And here you are.
Here I am, and it's great.
So glad you're here. I'm glad whatever train you missed led you here. I'm very glad you're here, and I know everyone watching is glad that you're here. Thank you again, Allison, for your time.
Thank you. This was so much fun.
It was a blast.
Let's do it all the time.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
This is gonna be a regular segment.
Yeah.
5 for Your First 5 is the book. Again, I'll put the link in the description for where you can buy it on Amazon. But let us know what you thought. Was there anything that resonated with you? Do you want to get into a mentoring relationship? Was there any of the 5 elements that you really resonated with you? Let us know. We want to hear about it, and keep us posted on your progress. Until next time.